I haven't seen our story being told in this way. And that was what you and I set out to do.
Yeah.
So when we've got some, real organic things happening on camera, it's unscripted, you've got a good soundtrack, you've got, good representation and people who are really enthusiastic to be part of it. I just think we've created something that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Hi, everyone. This is Akshay Verma, the Chief Operating Officer at SpotDraft, and also the host for our podcast, Beacon Voices. And I am really excited today to have a conversation with a longtime friend and peer in the legal operations industry, Susan Packal, who is currently the head of global legal operations and chief of staff at Avalara. Susan, how are you?
I'm well. I'm well. I'm excited to see you this morning.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit of a unique and maybe extra special episode, just given all that you have done over the last 3 years for the upcoming documentary that's going to be released next week at Clock about the history of legal operations, about how the function came to be, what it means for the industry, and how we're thinking about those things moving forward. But you and I have our own kind of origin story, which we'll talk about in a little bit, about how this all started. But I would love to go a little bit back beyond that, because I don't even think I fully knew what was such an important thing for you, that made you say, I want to do this through a visual film medium. So take us back, and we'll talk about the
Yeah.
day of, and I'll call it day one or
Yeah.
day zero,
Day
if you
one.
want to call it. We'll talk about that
Right.
in a little bit, but let's go a little bit further back beyond that, because one of the things that you have consistently said to me through this whole process, which is going on close to 3 years now, is that you've always wanted to do this, and you've always wanted to do it as a documentary, which is tell this story through the documentary. Why was that?
Mhm.
How did that start for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think having ended up in this career through kind of a windy path, starting with law firms and HR and ending up, where I found myself 15, 18 years later. It's just been interesting to watch our community evolve and grow. And when, if you go back 15 years and you hear this a lot in the film, people were doing this role before it really had a name, and before we were referring to it as legal operations, but it was operations and it was in the
Yeah.
legal space. Um, and I remember just seeing these people. I was on the East Coast at the time, so seeing these people on the West Coast, like Steph Corey and Connie and those folks, you know, kind of pull a community together. And it felt like the community was a lot more together than the community I had, on the East Coast at the time. I was just fascinated by, who are these people? How did they get into this?
Yeah.
How are they thinking about things? We all had this sort of this common purpose. And so I kind of felt like for the first few years, I did a lot of people watching. And in that space, you just met some really incredible people that came from different walks of life. And to me, that's a story. And I just started seeing this story come together. And I'm like, wouldn't it be great? I'm sure someday someone will do a documentary about this, because the career field, somebody will do it. I'm sure. I'm coming late to the game, and that never happened. And I think I felt, probably starting back in during COVID is when I
Yeah.
started really kind of playing around with some creative stuff, just even for work, doing some very, very light film production for our GC at the time. And really enjoyed it, and enjoyed piecing together the story and getting, the seeing people in a more real light than what you normally see on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And for me, it just started during COVID really taking off. And then, of course, led to the day you and I were just talking about. I don't want to jump ahead, but like,
Yeah.
you and I were both sharing with each other that we were ready to shake some shit up. Like, that was
Yeah.
the essence of the conversation we were having. And I think at that moment, I just felt like, you know what? I've been incubating this for a while. I think I need to like tell it to someone,
Yeah.
and see what you thought.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of different ways to tell stories. um, uh, historically with human beings, the kind of oral communication of stories passed down through the generation. I mean, I'm going way back. We can go back thousands of
Mhm,
years now.
mhm.
That was, like that was the way that we communicated stories. There was the written medium. Then you could go back to like all the cave paintings that have been found that are like 10,000 years old. Um, what is special for you around film? Is there something stronger, more vibrant, more effective for you in the way that a story gets told in a visual medium, or was it just kind of like I want to make a movie and let's tell the story through that?
I you know what? I am a marketer's dream. I am a sucker for any story with the right soundtrack, with the right pauses, and like what really hooked me on documentaries, just like even just moving forward as I look to the next phase of my career, was Drive to Survive for
Yeah,
F1. When I started getting to F1, of course, it wasn't as popular as was today. The film was not as popular as it is now, but I stumbled on it. I started watching it. I was like, this is an incredible documentary. It was, you saw the teams in highs, lows, people in very vulnerable moments. But when the lights turn on and they're in the cars, and just the incredible professionalism, athleticism, focus, rock star nature of what these people had to do. But we saw them in the film in all kinds of different settings. And when I said, I think I want to tell this documentary, I know this space, I know who the people are who I would want to be in this film. I want it to be real. If I'd had endless amount of time and two more camera crews, I think it would have been great to follow people around for much longer than we had a chance to. But I think that was the real key for me, is it had to get past the polish that we all need to have, you included, and in the roles
yeah,
that you had and you have now. But to tell a story, it's got to feel real. And I just
yeah,
wanted us to, kind of let the hair down a little bit and talk about the challenges of this and how unsexy this job was at the very beginning for most everyone. And you've got a great line in the film about being in a room full of boxes and paper, and like we all remember that. It was a very real moment. So yeah, so film. I'm a sucker for a good story, and so I knew, if we're going to do this, let's do it right, and let's peel back some layers a little bit. And thankfully, our characters really met us there, and they went deep, which was really
yeah.
rewarding.
I think that was for me one of the coolest things about what ended up getting on film is that there is an authenticity to not just what people said, but you could feel that they wanted to tell it. It was really important to them that this gets told, and
Yes,
I'm sure some of that will come out in certainly in our conversations at CGI next week with Clock, but also in some of the other follow up conversations that we'll do with other screening events and so forth. Because it's something I think is important to ask the people who graced us with being in the film is why was it so important for them to be a part of this
that's
and
right.
tell it and that answer that you get back is pretty special I think because it's such a human answer. All right, so
Well,
let's
and when
fast
people
forward.
sat down, oh, I was just going to say, when people sat down, there was no script. We did not give people questions ahead of time. We did not give them any sense of the types of things that we were going to be asking them. So
Yeah,
when you saw some of those moments unfold on camera, we were all seeing it,
yeah.
organically live at the moment. Those were not scripted moments. So that
No,
was
no,
that was
not at
pretty
all,
incredible.
not at all. I remember doing my own filming last year at CGI and sitting down and all of a sudden Joe's firing off questions at me. I was like, oh, cool. Okay, I guess I have answers for this. Like, let's go. Let's
Me
just
too.
go. I'm ready.
That's right.
It's
That's
a
right.
great way to get an unvarnished kind of response, which is really the one that you should be getting. To me, that's kind of Not that I've ever made a documentary before, but I imagine that if I was ever to do it again, that would be a requirement. It's like we're not
For the rest of
repeating
your
the same.
documentary career, Akshay,
Yes,
if you
for
live
my
over.
now
Yes,
budding filmmaking career.
that's correct. That's correct.
I'll stick to maybe just providing funding and unblocking things, and not actually the filmmaking itself. Um, so let's get to the day. Let's get to the
The
day.
day.
We'll call it day zero, Inception Day, whatever we want to call it. We should have a name for it, by the way. Like I think it's
We need a
important for
name.
us
We
to
need a better name.
have.
I
And
agree.
one of the things I wanted to just call out is I didn't remember if we took the picture intentionally for this purpose, but it is such a perfect picture. It's in the movie. You and I are on that bluff right behind the hotel. We're going for a hike, a little walk in the back
Yes.
path. And I don't remember if you said we should just memorialize this moment because now we've talked about it, or maybe we had just taken a picture. Can you remind me? Like, my memory is a little
Yes.
tapped on that one. What was the genesis for taking that picture?
I remember it like it was yesterday. We had not seen each other in a while. And when, you said you wanted to go on this hike, we were talking about completely other things. And that was the last thing we did before we got to the top of the bluff to walk back to the parking lot, actually,
Okay.
unsexy parking
Okay.
lot of the hotel.
Yeah.
And so that picture was just like, hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. We should get a picture. I didn't have anything current.
Got it. Got it.
And
Got it.
it was probably only 10-15 minutes after that picture is when you kind of started flirting around a little bit with when kind of what your next move might be, and that
Yeah.
kind of opened the door. So that picture was completely unplanned and unrelated to the conversation we ended up having just a few minutes later.
That's cool. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I vaguely remember. So a couple of things had happened. This was September 23. I had just bought a Rivian a couple of months before, and that was the first kind of long road trip I had done with the car. So I think the car was charging in the parking lot.
That's
I think
why
we
we were going.
walked back
Okay.
that way because I
Yeah.
wanted to check in on the charge. And I think you had raised the documentary with me in the parking lot and not on the dirt path hike piece of it. But then the other part was, and I think I told you this at the time, I was literally in those 2 days finalizing the negotiations with Shashank to leave Coinbase and join
That's right.
SpotDraft as their COO. So there was
That's right.
already a lot of change kind of going on in my own head, and like I was about to take another pretty big kind of risk and leap in my
Yes.
career. So it
Yes.
lined up nicely
I hit
for
you right at the
that.
right time. Everything just aligned.
Yeah, look,
You were
I
feeling
talk
like
about this
your
a lot.
risk taking was the mood.
I talk about this a lot with people who ask me about my choices, like leaving the practice of law and doing other things. But man, taking a risk is so worth it. The
Mhm.
older that I get, the better, hopefully, my judgment becomes about the risk calculation, and hopefully that so then you reduce the bad side of the consequences that are possible. They're still there, but it's just not for me. It was never going to be fun if we didn't take risks in our lives. My dad left India in 1984 with a family, no money, and just his education to
Mm.
bring us over here. I mean, I couldn't even imagine
Wow.
doing that with my family. I couldn't imagine doing that.
Yeah.
So that was the first big risk that I can call back upon without knowing it back then, that like really had an impact on the way I looked at life and the way that I thought about things. But
It's in your genes. It's in your genetic
it
makeup.
just it was something that just felt somewhat very natural to me. And so again, I don't think I ever looked at your idea to do a documentary as a risk, because I just looked at it as like, oh wow, that's a really cool idea. Um, what did it feel like?
Do you remember what you said
I don't. What did
after
I say?
after I told you? You said, well, after you said, I think that's fucking fantastic. We have that in the film. The very
Yeah.
next thing you said was, well, how can I participate in this? Like, how can I help with this? And I was like, I mean, I just things happened so fast. It was just not where I thought our conversation was going. I was really expecting you to like challenge me a little bit more. Like, are you sure you really, And instead, you were like,
Yeah.
how do I get in on this? I want to do this with you. And that was
Yeah.
that was really the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it's an emotional reaction. And to me, I mean, like, tying this into filmmaking, part of the reason I think movies are so impactful to deliver messages is because they have a unique ability to elicit emotions from people, right?
Right.
Two people watching the same show or movie or documentary can have drastically different emotional responses because they're bringing their own lives, their own histories and baggage and emotional trauma, whatever you want to call it. Like, you bring all of that to a show. Like, it happens. Like, my wife and I are watching a show, and like, I'll get super emotional about a part, and she's like, "What the hell's wrong with you?" And like, there'll be another part, and she'll be like bawling. I'm like, "Why are you bawling? This is a really..." So you bring that individual approach and reaction to the film, and not that this is a drama, but there are some very emotional components to this story because a lot of really hard shit had to happen to certain people. They had to go through some really tough stuff to
Yes.
say, I'm going to now go into this and
Yes.
completely change my career or build something. And I have to take this head on. Like, those are all very emotional drivers.
That's
And I
right.
think movies
Yeah.
have an ability to tap into that. So I'm excited to see how that lands for folks.
I think that too. There's another. I saw another side of that, and we talk. I talk a little bit about it in the behind the scenes episode when I'm sitting in the car having moments of self doubt. But it was, I knew what I wanted generally, how deep I wanted to go and how real I wanted to get with people, and go into their homes, and I had all these ideas, but had no idea how people were going to react once they kind of saw things unfold and realized, like, oh, you don't want me to just talk about my career. You want me to like go a little deeper and tell you how I got into this and the challenges and more unvarnished view. And so it was a risk for people too. They were, I remember we didn't have anyone, pull out or say like, oh, this is not what I thought. I changed my mind. We didn't have
Yep.
that. But
Yep.
it was a risk for people to say, you know what, I am okay putting myself out there in this way because I believe in the story, right? And I
Yeah.
believe in this project. So I think there was risk taking all around, but that was very cool to see people, these all these characters just say, "Yep, I think I'm in. I'm all in. Let's go."
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll just remind the listeners and the viewers of this that the documentary is going to be released next week for the very first time to the general public at Clock CGI. They've been a fantastic partner through the process in the
They
post
have.
production and really engaging and understanding the importance that this story brings to their membership. Um, and so the documentary itself is 4 parts. I want to talk a little bit about the fourth part, um, because I love that its focus was, why was this made? Your brainchild, kind of all of your efforts in making sure that it got made with the level of integrity that I now see in the finished product, which we got to watch. I got to watch last night in its full, and it was amazing. Um, and as I'm watching episode 4, one of the things that you talked about was early on getting a coach to help you think through how you should do this. Talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah. Well, when after you and I had more conversations after the parking lot, but once we both knew, like, we're definitely doing this, and Shashank was behind us and we were definitely in it. I did what any operations person would do, right? Is you've been given a new challenge. This is new space. You don't have experience to draw on here other than just general creativity. I'm like, well, I need a coach. I need
Yeah,
someone who does documentaries, who has gone through this process and who can give me general framework, on how to attack, this general project. And so I did have a coach I met with, every week for several months, who really walked me through kind of, here's how to like sort of be thinking about your story structure, letting me know kind of what was going to be coming next, what were the next phases I was going to need to go through. And the big one was, okay, you need to hire directors. You need people who are actually running the cameras and on set and who are going to execute, on the vision, but also who are going to bring their own, perspective to it and have, influence over the storytelling as well. And so just having a coach there to like walk me through, he's the one that actually connected me on this rando message board that is used in the film community for small documentary filmmakers, where they pass around jobs and share, almost like a classifieds section
Yeah.
for folks online. And that's how we got turned on to Reverie, who we ended up partnering with. But we bid it out. We had 3 or 4 uh companies come back and then pitch to us. And some were better than others, but some people really got it. Because remember, this, if you think this was like, I had never done this before, we were talking
Yeah.
to filmmakers who had literally no idea what legal opera, I mean, not at all. They were like, well, my husband's a lawyer, or my parents were lawyers. I mean, that was as close as the legal industry as they had gotten. And
Yeah.
they were agreeing to take on this type of piece, knowing they would be in it for at least a year, right? Everyone knew we would not. When my coach told me, he said, now, you're going to need about 3 years to do this. I was like, 3 years. Akshay and I don't need 3 years. We can get this done. Well, it took every bit of over 2 years to do it.
Yeah.
So I think getting the coach was the right thing to do. It led us to the right, you know, directors in Reverie. And I think I did what anyone would have done faced with the same challenge. Got to get some
So
support.
I'm actually going to challenge that a little bit. And to
Uh-oh.
me, kudos to you for looking for help at the right time. I don't think we do that enough in our lives. And granted, there's obviously a lot at stake here with money and people and all those kinds of things. But I don't know that everybody would have done the same thing. Some people may have just tried to put their head down and kind of bulldoze their way through it and figure it out. But you were like, I need someone who's done this before to help show me what I should be thinking about, my blind spots, all those kinds of
Blind
things,
spots. That's
because
right.
I haven't done this before. So
That's right.
I'm not sure everyone would have done it that way. So I'm glad that you did it that way, because I think at the end of the day, it really paid off dividends for everything. I mean, if your coach was saying this is going to take you every bit of 3 years and we got it done in like 2+, then you did something right. I'd say you did something right. So,
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's good old Sebastian, who, by the way, sent a text last night, wishing, he said, you and Akshay had done this, you've gotten it done, and just been following along in the sidelines for all this time. So he knew
yeah.
exactly what was happening and was checking in. So
Has he
yeah,
seen
he's
it
been
by
a
any
great
chance?
partner.
Has he seen
Pardon?
it? Has he seen
No,
it? No? I'd be curious
no,
to get his take. I mean, it'd be fun because he was there with you from the beginning,
from
and
the
it'd
beginning.
be kind of cool to get his take on like, how
He
did you
saw the
think this
trailer.
turned out? Yeah.
He saw
Oh,
the
he saw the trailer.
trailer. He was super excited when he saw the trailer.
Um, what was for you uh, the hardest part about doing this, start to finish? What was the hardest thing for you in this?
Well, when I look back, I started a new big role as this was getting started.
Yeah.
I was kicking off at a new company, and all the things that come with that. And I built a team from scratch over at Atlassian at the time. And so, the whole, as and your first year at any company, you're building trust, you're building relationships, you're proving yourself. And I had a side job that took every bit of my time, and the nights, the weekends, whenever Atlassian had a holiday, I was working on the film. So that was incredibly stressful. And I just remember there a few times there being some, key deadlines for the film that really had to happen. And, juggling work like everyone else, you're juggling work, but I had zero life. If I wasn't working in Atlassian, I was working on the film. And then, as I ended up going, with my former chief legal officer to where I am now. So I left a role and started another role
Yeah.
as we were, going into post production on
Yeah.
this film, or as we were wrapping up filming. So I was still having to go to set locations and had 2 laptops and three different calendars at one time, managing for the media company High Desert, and then for my work calendar. and you and I texting and me texting with the team. So I did find that being an operations person, I think, set me up well for that, because we're
Yes.
generally used to keeping 100 pieces on the board and you're just moving everything forward every day.
Yeah.
But this
Yeah.
was like, don't drop the fucking ball. That
Yeah.
was in any of those places, because there are
Yeah.
real consequences for that. And I also, we were in it together, and there was always this like, I don't want to let Akshay and SpotDraft down. I want this to be as good as they hope it's going to be. So for me, that wasn't added pressure, but it was an extra thing for me. Like, this is special. This is a big deal. You can't let this slide. And I
Yeah.
think, having my husband, sit me down more than once, and just say, you really are going to have to dig deep. Like, you can see the end of the tunnel to this. You can
Yeah.
see the light, but
Yeah.
it's crazy right now. You're just going to have to dig deep, and you can do this. You can get it done.
Yeah. And look, it's done now and it's fantastic. And I think one of the things that I will never forget through this process was seeing the visual. I think it was episode one, the very first rough cut, but it had music tied to it. And just thinking to myself, wow, this is way better than I expected. And it was the first kind of gut check for myself and a realization that I think I had expected, like, I don't know, handy cam footage of like home movie style. And I think I had to really be like, wait, why do I think this is, why did I not think it would be this good? And I think I realized
Right.
that I think I was expecting lower quality. The production value on this thing is phenomenal. And I think it
Yeah.
just adds to the overall experience. I think it deepens the value of the story that's being told. So I'm really excited to see the reactions to this thing next
Me
week and
too.
in the coming weeks and
Me too.
months, and all of that. And one of the things that I will prepare myself for, and I would urge you to do as well, is the quote unquote constructive criticism that will come
Oh,
across,
I'm
that will come
sure.
along with it. And I
I'm
think, and then
sure.
the way I'm preparing myself is, people have every right to critique whatever is put in front of
Yes.
them. That's okay.
Yes.
Whatever the movie's made, you and I feel
Yes.
really good about how it came out. The people who are in it are going to love it, and that's what we cared about the
I think
most.
they are.
That's
I
the
think
rest of
there's
it
some good
is
feels in
next week.
there.
Yeah, there'll be a
Yeah. I
Siskel and
think there's
Ebert
some
out
good
there somewhere. That
feels.
will, yeah,
I spent, the soundtrack was really important to me. I spent a lot more time on that probably than the directors wanted me to, but it made a difference, just when you talk about, when you were mentioning the quality and just the type of story we were telling and the feels. I wanted it all. I wanted the film
yeah,
to have everything. So we'll see, but I'm prepared. You and I will be hand in hand next week.
yeah.
Smiles at her face, hoping that when we look around the room, there might be some other smiles. There might be some more smiles in
There
there.
should be quite a few smiles. All right, so we talked a little bit about what was the hardest part for you on this. What was the most fun part for you through all of this?
The creative outlet. I got to be honest. I enjoyed being on set. I enjoyed, um, I would say that Reverie, the directors were super on board and supportive. They knew that I was learning and that I had a coach and that I was trying to apply what I learned, but I also had some immediate reactions, either good or bad, to certain things as it was happening. And they were very like in the moment. I could voice that. There was never a time where anyone made me feel like, you've never done this before. Like, you
Yeah,
just stay away. That never happened. And so I was right there on set, several times, just kind of I playing different roles on, like, the background, and, oh, that pillow looks weird, and just,
yeah,
weird stuff like that. But it was just the creative instinct, and just in our daily work, as you know, sometimes you just don't get that creative side of your brain, get those juices flowing, and really let them go. And I felt like on this project, when I put down legal ops day job and picked up legal ops night work, that was really when I could just step back and just release a lot of creativity. And how do I want the community to see that? And is the community going to react well to that? Does that sound right? Is that right? Do we need to balance that opinion? But as you and I talked about, we also wanted differing opinions. We knowing that not everyone's going to agree on every point of the legal ops story, and that
Yep.
that's fine. That this
Yep.
film should hopefully spark conversation.
Yeah.
That's what we're hoping to do. So I am going to miss having the creative outlet. I'm gonna have to think hard about what the next thing will involve for the side gig, because I really
Yeah.
needed that out.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, maybe we do some follow-ups for the documentary itself. I'm sure there will be other ideas that come our way for people who we didn't get a chance. I think part of this was limited by time and budget,
That's right.
and all of those kinds of things. But the story is nowhere near told, even in its current
Mm-mm.
state.
At
There's so
all.
much
At all.
outside of this movie that still can be told, which I think are very compelling stories to tell. So maybe we do. We'll see. Maybe we'll do that down the road as well. Um, a lot of people are going to watch this movie. It's going to be public on websites. There are going to be screenings. There are going to be people within our profession of legal operations who will see it. There are going to be people completely outside of the legal profession who are going to see it. At least I hope they will, because I would love for them
Yes.
to see it,
Yes.
because I think that's part of the power of a movie like this. What do you hope are the takeaways that they see? And if you have different takeaways for people in legal operations versus GCs and CLOs, and then
Definitely. Yeah.
people who are entirely outside of the profession, like tell us what you hope they take away from it.
I really hope that at least our general, ops community learns something a little bit on just connecting some of the dots on how some of the OGs in the space that we talk about, and there are many that we didn't get a chance to include in the film, but the ones that we did, to really understand how we got to where we are today, the doors that opened because of the groundwork that these folks helped to lay, and through grinding it out, through working in a career that didn't really have a name at the time, I just, it was important that people coming into our field now could connect the dots to see how things evolved and how we got to, and that they're still evolving with AI. Some of the questions we leave unanswered on purpose in the film
Yeah.
should be really interesting. I also was hoping that, and I think I mentioned this in the film too, is there still, we talked about a lot of, there are GCs and CLOs that are still, this space is unproven to them. They haven't had either the right ops partnership, or they've had no ops partnership yet. And I think that those are the people that I want them to see this breadth of experience and what this role brings to their organization, how to run their business, their legal like a business. And so to me, I'm hoping maybe some light bulbs go off that, like, oh, I think I'm starting to understand what the hype is about this
Yeah.
role. So I think
Yeah.
there's still a lot of work we need to do there still,
Yeah.
with just the GC community for sure.
Yeah. Last question, and then we'll wrap up. Um, what do you hope, or what do you think this film will mean for the profession of legal operations itself?
Um, Well, of course, we don't know. We have hopes, but the hope is that people see our story in a different light. And again, I think we can all go to LinkedIn and see each other's accomplishments and see updates from our companies and see people doing well and people who are great messengers and great communicators and are very ambitious, and all of that stuff you can see and find out there. But I
Yeah.
would challenge that I haven't seen our story being told in this way. And that was what you and I set out to do.
Yeah.
So when you've got some, real organic things happening on camera, it's unscripted, you've got a good soundtrack, you've got, good representation and people who are really enthusiastic to be part of it. I just think we've created something that doesn't exist anywhere else. Not yet. So maybe
Yeah.
this will open the door, and there will be other people who have creative ideas to tell parts of this story that, like you said, the story is not told yet in full.
Yeah.
It's still happening. It's still evolving. So yeah,
I love that.
that's my
It's
hope.
a great message to wrap on. Thank you for joining me today and talking about this. Thank you for having the courage to want to tell this story and making it happen. And thank you for the trust that you put in SpotDraft and in me to kind of help make it a reality. And I'm looking forward to all the conversations and the reactions and all of the viewings in the coming months, including next week at CGI.
Well, thank you to you, Shashank, the Spot Draft team. I loved every minute of it, and really, really can't thank you enough, Akshay.